Nobody remembered when the little fox girl first appeared on level 9 of Bridgeport Hub. She was just there one day, like rust on old pipes, like the flicker in the overhead lights that maintenance never fixed. Small, thin, covered in dull, patchy fur the color of faded copper. Ears too big for her head, eyes too wide for her face. And she was always singing. Her name was Lyra, though nobody on the station bothered to ask. She was Fenari, a species most traders only knew from cargo manifests and cheap labor contracts. Fox-like in appearance, soft-spoken, and mostly harmless. Their colonies were scattered across the outer rim, and their ships broke down more often than they arrived. Lyra's ship had broken apart 3 cycles ago somewhere between jump points. She had been found drifting in an escape pod by a salvage crew who dropped her at Bridgeport Hub because they did not want the trouble of reporting a miner to the authorities that Lyra sat on an overturned cargo crate near the food court on level 9, and she sang. Among the Fenari, singing was not entertainment. It was not performance. It was language. When a Fenari child was lost, they sang a calling song. It was a sound that carried specific meaning, a vibration that said, "I am here. Where are you? Please come find me." Lyra's throat markings, the bioluminescent patches that all Fenari carried along their necks and jawlines, would glow faintly with each note. A dim, flickering blue, the color of searching. Nobody on the station understood this of the Drenai traders who passed her every morning on their way to the commodity exchange. The sound was an annoyance. The Drenai were tall, gray-skinned, broad-shouldered species who valued silence and efficiency above all things. One of them, a dealer named Gore, made a habit of tossing a worthless half-credit chip at her feet each time he walked by. "Buy yourself a muzzle," he said once, and his companions laughed. The Hollow Guard, Bridgeport Hub's private security force, told her to move 3 times a week. She would pick up her crate, walk 50 meters down the corridor, and sit again. They stopped bothering after a while. She was not stealing. She was not begging. She was just singing, and there was no regulation against being sad in public. Weeks turned into months. Lyra grew thinner. Her fur lost more of its shine. The glow in her throat markings dimmed until it was barely visible, just a faint pulse, like a heartbeat running out of strength. She ate what she could find. Dropped food near vendor stalls. Half-finished meals left on tables. Once, a Pelori cook gave her a bowl of grain broth out of pity, but his manager saw and told him not to do it again. Bad for business, attracting strays. Lyra did not stop singing that on a Tuesday, by station standard time, Danny Kowalski walked through level 9, carrying 2 bags of groceries and holding the hand of his 5-year-old daughter, Rosie. Danny was 34. Human. Tired in the way that single parents are tired, which is to say, tired all the way down to the bone. He had come to Bridgeport Hub 14 months ago after his wife, Anna, died in an industrial accident on a human colony called Breaker's Landing. There was nothing left for him there. No family. No siblings. Just a daughter who kept asking when mommy was coming home, and a man who had no answer. He worked cargo, loading and unloading freight containers in the station's lower docks. It was hard work that paid just enough. He and Rosie lived in a small apartment on level 12, 2 rooms and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. It was not much, but it was theirs. Rosie was the kind of child who noticed everything. She noticed when ants walked in lines on the station's garden deck. She noticed when the lights buzzed differently on odd-numbered levels. And she noticed, as they walked through the food court, a sound that made her stop mid-step. She tugged Danny's hand. "Daddy, come on, Rosie. We need to get home before the frozen stuff melts." "Daddy, listen." Danny stopped. He listened at "It" was Lyra's song. Faint, almost swallowed by the noise of the food court, the clattering of trays, the chatter of a dozen species. But it was there, a melody that rose and fell like breathing, like waves, like something alive and hurting. Rosie looked up at her father with wide, serious eyes. "Daddy," she's crying. Danny looked across the food court. He saw the small fox girl on the cargo crate. He saw the patchy fur and the 2 big ears and the faint, dying glow along her throat. He saw the way she sat with her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped around them. making herself as small as possible, as if she was trying to disappear. Around her, hundreds of beings walked past. Dranai, paluri, sondari, umans. Thousands of feet, thousands of eyes. Not one of them stopped. Danny had seen a lot of hard things in his life. He had buried his wife. He had explained death to a 3-year-old. He had worked shifts so long his hands bled. But something about this, about a child singing for someone who was never going to come, in a crowd of people who could not be bothered to listen, hit him in a place he thought he had sealed shut. He looked down at Rosie. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, she is." He shifted the grocery bags to one hand and walked toward the little fox girl. Nobody on Bridgeport Hub paid attention. It was just a human walking across a food court. Nothing important. Nothing worth noticing. They were wrong. The first thing Lyra noticed was the boots. Heavy, scuffed, human work boots stopping right in front of her crate. She had learned to read boots on Bridgeport Hub. Hollow guard boots meant move. Draenei boots meant insults. Most boots just kept walking. These boots stopped. She looked up slowly. A human male stood over her, tall by her standards, carrying grocery bags that smelled like bread and something warm. His face was rough with stubble, and his eyes had dark circles under them. But those eyes were not angry. They were not disgusted. They were just looking at her the way almost nobody ever did, like she was a person. Then she saw the smaller one. A tiny human girl peeking out from behind the man's leg. Round face, brown hair pulled into 2 messy tails. Eyes enormous with curiosity. Lyra stopped singing. She pressed herself back against the wall. Every instinct told her to run. Beings who approached her on this station wanted things. They wanted her to work. They wanted her to leave. They wanted her to stop existing so loudly. The man knelt down. Slowly. The way you kneel when you do not want to scare a small animal. He set a warm container on the ground in front of her. It was noodle soup. She could smell the salt and broth, and her stomach twisted so hard she almost gasped. "You don't have to stop singing," he said. His voice was low and tired and kind. "It's beautiful." Lyra did not speak human common well. She knew maybe 40 words, picked up from listening to conversations in the food court. But she understood his tone. She understood the softness in it. Fenari were built to read emotion through sound. It was what they did. And this human's voice carried no threat, no pity that came with conditions, no impatience that he just meant it. Before Lyra could react, the small girl did something that changed everything. She walked right past her father, climbed up onto the cargo crate, and sat down next to Lyra. Just sat down. Like it was nothing, Lyra froze. No one had sat next to her in months. No one had voluntarily put themselves that close to her since the escape pod. She stared at this tiny human girl who smelled like soap and sugar cookies and who was now swinging her short legs off the edge of the crate like they were old friends on a park bench. "I'm Rosie," the girl said. "What's your name?" Lyra understood the question. She had heard it before, though never directed at her with any real interest. "Lyra," she whispered. "That's pretty," Rosie said. Then she started humming that it was not a real melody. It was clumsy and off-key and wandered around like a lost thing. But Rosie was trying to match Lyra's song. She had heard maybe 30 seconds of it, and she was doing her best to follow along. Something happened that Danny Kowalski did not understand at the time, but would learn about later that Lyra's throat markings, which had been dim and flickering for months, pulsed. Not blue this time. A faint, uncertain amber. Among the Fenari, harmonizing with someone's song, even badly, even just an attempt, was one of the most profound social acts their species knew. It meant I hear you. You're not alone. It was what parents did with children, what bonded pairs did with each other, what family did. This clumsy little human girl, without knowing anything about Fenari culture or biology, had just told Lyra she was not alone. That Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Fenari tears were clear and slightly luminous, and they rolled down her furred cheeks in small glowing trails. Danny watched all of this. He did not rush. He did not interfere. He just watched his daughter do what she always did, which was walk straight into the broken places of the world and sit down like she belonged there. After a few minutes, he pulled out his translation pad. It was a cheap model, cracked screen, slow processor, the kind cargo workers got issued for dealing with alien shipping labels. He typed in a simple question and held it out to Lyra, The screen read, "Do you have anyone? Family? Someone taking care of you?" Lyra looked at the screen for a long time. Then she looked at Danny. Then she looked at Rosie, who was still humming beside her, completely unconcerned with the heaviness of the moment. Lyra said one word. "Gone." Danny felt that word hit him like a freight container. He knew what gone meant. He had said it himself, in different ways, to different people over the past 2 years. Gone was the word you used when the truth was too big and too sharp to hold in your mouth, that he should have walked away. He knew that. He was a cargo loader, making just enough to feed 2 people. His apartment was barely big enough for a father and daughter. He had no experience with alien children, no knowledge of Fenari biology, no legal standing to take in a non-human minor. Every rational thought in his head told him to put the soup down, wish her well, and keep walking. Rosie was still humming that Lyra's throat markings were still glowing amber. Danny looked at the soup container. He looked at the small fox girl who weighed maybe 20 kilos and had been living on scraps in a food court for months. He looked at his daughter, who had already decided this was her friend. "Okay," he said. He did not say it to anyone in particular. He said it to himself, to the part of him that was already doing the math and knew it did not add up. "Okay." He picked up the grocery bags. He held out his free hand to Lyra. "You're coming with us tonight," he said. "Just for tonight. We'll figure it out." Lyra stared at his hand. Open, palm up, waiting. She took it. Her fingers were small and furred and slightly cold, and they wrapped around his rough, callous palm like they had been looking for it. The 3 of them walked through the food court together. A tired human man carrying groceries, a 5-year-old girl chattering about what they were going to have for dinner, and a silent little fox girl holding on to a stranger's hand like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. Nobody watched them go. But that was fine. The important things never needed an audience. 3 weeks passed, and just for tonight became the biggest lie Danny Kowalski ever told himself. The IT started small. That first night, Lyra slept on a pile of blankets in the corner of Rosie's room. She curled into a tight ball the way Fenari did when they felt unsafe, tail wrapped around her body, ears flat against her head. Danny checked on her twice before going to bed himself. Both times, her eyes were open, watching the door like she expected someone to come and drag her away. Be why the third night, Rosie had pulled her own pillow off her bed and put it next to Lyra's blankets. By the 5th night, the 2 of them were sleeping side by side, Rosie's arm thrown carelessly over Lyra's small frame, and for the first time Danny saw Lyra's ears relaxed in sleep. Danny had not planned for any of this. He had planned to contact the station's social services division the next morning and hand Lyra over to someone qualified, someone with resources, someone who knew what a Fenari child needed. But the next morning, Rosie was teaching Lyra how to eat cereal with a spoon, and Lyra was teaching Rosie a Fenari word for milk that sounded like a small bell ringing. And Danny stood in the kitchen doorway holding his coffee and realized that handing this child over to a system that had already failed her was not something he was able to do. So he went to the social integration office instead. Not to surrender Lyra, but to register her as a dependent. The office was on level 4, a sterile gray corridor lined with plastic chairs and flickering overhead screens displaying wait times in 6 languages. Danny took a number. He waited 2 hours. When his number was finally called, he sat down across from a Santhri caseworker named Officer Pell. Pell was tall, thin, four-armed, with smooth blue-gray skin and eyes that looked like polished stones. He typed on 2 separate terminals simultaneously while Danny explained the situation. "You found an unregistered Fenari minor on level 9. Pell said, not looking up. "And you took her to your residence?" "Yes." "Without authorization. She was starving." Pell typed for another 30 seconds. "Fenari orphans in this jurisdiction are processed through the minor placement program. Standard placement for her demographic is labor rehabilitation on an outer rim facility." Danny felt something cold settle in his chest. Labor rehabilitation. She's a child. She is 7 standard cycles. The Fenari mature rapidly. By 12 cycles, she will be work eligible. The rehabilitation program prepares minors for productive integration. It's a labor camp. Pell finally looked up. His stone eyes showed nothing. "It is the standard process, Mr. Kowalski." If you would like to file a formal objection, you may do so through the appeals system. Current wait time for appeals is 14 to 18 months. Danny leaned forward. I want to register as her guardian. Pell stared at him for a long moment. Then he went back to typing. Interspecies guardianship requires proof of financial stability above the station minimum for multi-dependent households, species-appropriate housing, a filed dietary plan approved by a xenobiological consultant, and a background review. The process takes 6 to 12 months. In the meantime, the minor must be placed in temporary institutional care. She stays with me. That is not how the process works. Then make it work differently. Pell's four hands stopped typing. He looked at Danny the way someone looks at a rock that has suddenly started talking. In his experience, which was long and thorough, humans who found alien orphans brought them in, filed a report, and went home feeling good about themselves. They did not sit in plastic chairs for 2 hours and then argue about guardianship. Mr. Kowalski, Pell said carefully, you're a cargo loader. Your income is barely sufficient for your current household. You have no xenobiological training. You're not Finari. What exactly qualifies you to raise this child? Danny thought about Rosie pulling her pillow onto the floor. He thought about Lyra's throat markings glowing amber in the dark. He thought about the sound of 2 little girls laughing that morning when Lyra accidentally flicked cereal across the table with her tail. She's safe, Danny said. She's eating. She's sleeping through the night. That's more than your system gave her in 3 months. Pell's expression did not change. He printed a stack of forms, each one thick enough to be its own book, and slid them across the desk. File these. All of them. You have 30 days before mandatory review. If you cannot meet the requirements by then, the minor will be transferred to institutional placement. Danny took the forms. He did not thank Pell. There was nothing to thank him for. That night, he sat at the kitchen table after both girls were asleep and stared at the pile of paperwork. Financial disclosures, housing inspections, dietary compliance forms, xenobiological assessments, each one requiring fees he did not have and knowledge he did not possess. He could hear Lyra singing softly in the other room. Not the calling song. Something different. Something warmer. The melody rose and fell gently, like a rocking chair, like a lullaby. He realized she was singing Rosie to sleep. Danny put his head in his hands. He stayed like that for a while. Then he picked up the first form and started reading that he was not qualified. He knew that. He was a widower with a dead-end job and an apartment the size of a closet. He had no legal standing, no species training, no money for consultants. But his daughter had sat down next to a starving alien girl and hummed along to her song. And that girl was now singing lullabies in his home, and some things did not need qualifications. Some things just needed someone stubborn enough to show up. Danny picked up his pen and started filling in the forms. The rumors started on a Monday. Danny did not know how word got out. Maybe a neighbor saw Lyra through the apartment window. Maybe someone in the cargo bay overheard him asking about Finari dietary needs during a break. Maybe the station's bureaucracy leaked like it always did, because nothing stayed private on Bridgeport Hub for long. By Wednesday, everyone on Level 12 seemed to know that the human cargo loader in Apartment 12C had taken in a stray alien kid. The reactions were not kind. I in the cargo bay. A loader named Hicks brought it up during the morning shift. Heard you adopted a pet, Kowalski. A few of the other workers laughed. Danny kept stacking containers and said nothing. Hicks was not a bad guy. He was just the kind of guy who made jokes about things he did not understand because it was easier than thinking about them. His supervisor, Griggs, was more direct. He called Danny into his office, which was really just a desk behind a partition, and told him straight. The holo guard flagged your file. Officer Pell's office filed something. I don't know the details, but they're watching you. Watching me for what? For whatever they need to justify taking the kid. Danny, I'm not telling you what to do, but this station runs on rules, and you're bending a lot of them. Danny nodded. He went back to work. Outside the human quarter, it was worse. The Drenai traders on Level 9, the same ones who had mocked Lyra for months, now had a new target. Gore, the one who used to throw credit chips at her, stopped Danny in a corridor one afternoon. I hear you collect Finari now, Gore said. He was a head taller than Danny and twice as wide. Is this a human hobby? Keeping the broken ones? Danny looked up at him. She's not broken. Girl made a sound that might have been a laugh. She's Finari. They break easily. When you get tired of her, there are always buyers on the lower decks who will take her off your hands. Danny's hands tightened into fists at his sides. He knew what Gore was talking about. The lower decks of Bridgeport Hub were where things happened that the Hollow Guard pretended not to see. Labor trafficking. Worse, the kind of things that made Danny's stomach turn that he wanted to hit Gore. He wanted it badly. But he had two girls at home who needed him not in a holding cell. So he unclenched his fists and walked away. Soft skin, Gore called after him. All sentiment. No spine. Danny kept walking. The hardest part was not the insults. The hardest part was the paperwork. Officer Pell had given him 30 days. Danny spent every free hour filling out forms, researching Finari biology on the station's public data terminals, and trying to figure out what a 7-cycle-old fox girl needed to eat, how much sleep she required, what temperature her room should be, what common illnesses affected her species, and 100 other things that no one had ever taught him. He learned that Finari were warm-blooded but ran slightly cooler than humans. He learned that they needed high-protein, low-sugar diets with specific amino acids found in insect-based proteins. He learned that their bioluminescent markings were tied to their emotional state and that a healthy Finari child's markings should glow steadily, not flicker. That he filed the dietary plan. He adjusted the apartment temperature. He applied for a housing upgrade. He requested a xenobiological assessment from a clinic on level 6 that offered free consultations for refugee minors. Every time he met a requirement, Pell found a new one that the housing was too small. Danny applied for an upgrade. Pell said the upgrade required a higher income bracket. Danny picked up extra shifts. Pell noted that working extra shifts meant less time with a minor, which could be flagged as neglect. Danny cut back the extra shifts. Pell noted that his income was now below threshold again. IT was a circle, a trap designed to grind people down until they gave up. Danny did not give up, but he was getting tired, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. Lyra noticed. She did not say much. Her human common was improving every day, thanks to Rosie's relentless tutoring, but she was still a quiet child by nature. She watched things. She listened. And she could read emotional tones the way humans read facial expressions. She could hear the exhaustion in Danny's voice when he talked on the comm. She could hear the tension when he came home from work. She could hear the worry he tried to hide behind "everything's fine, girls." One night, Danny woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of singing. It was faint, coming from the girls' room. He got up and walked quietly to the doorway. Lyra was sitting up in her blanket nest, knees pulled to her chest, singing the calling song. The same song from the food court. The one that meant "I am here. Where are you? Please come find me." Her throat markings pulsed a dim, frightened blue. She knew. She could feel it coming, the way animals feel a storm before it arrives. She knew that someone was trying to take her away from this place, from this small, warm apartment where a little girl held her hand and a tired man filled out forms until midnight. She was calling again. Not for her lost parents this time. She was calling for this. For them. Begging the universe not to take it away. Danny stood in the doorway and felt his heart crack down the middle. Then he heard a rustling sound. Rosie, half asleep, crawled out of her bed and into Lyra's blanket nest. She did not open her eyes. She just wrapped her arms around Lyra and mumbled in her fur. "Daddy won't let them take you. He promised." Danny leaned against the doorframe. He closed his eyes that he had not actually made that promise. Not out loud, but his 5-year-old had made it for him, and that meant it was real now, and that meant he could not break it. He went back to the kitchen table. He picked up the forms. He kept going. Somewhere on level 4, Officer Pell was scheduling a formal custody review. The date was set for 3 weeks out. If Danny could not meet every requirement by then, Lyra would be transferred to institutional care and processed for labor rehabilitation on a mining outpost. Danny did not know about the hearing yet, but he would. And when he found out, he would not run. He would not give up. Humans never did. That was the thing about them that the rest of the galaxy never quite understood. They were not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but they were the most stubborn. And sometimes that was enough. The integration tribunal chamber on level 3 was the coldest room on Bridgeport Hub. Not because of the temperature, though that was low enough. It was cold because it was designed to be cold. Metal walls, metal chairs, a long metal table where 3 tribunal judges sat behind screens that glowed a sterile white. Everything about the room said, "This is not a place for feelings." Danny sat on a bench facing the tribunal. He wore his cleanest shirt, which still had a faded stain on the collar. Beside him sat Lyra and Rosie. Rosie held Lyra's hand. Lyra's ears were flat against her skull, and her throat markings were dim, almost dark. She was terrified. Officer Pell sat on the opposite side of the chamber, his 4 hands folded neatly in front of him. He had a data tablet loaded with files, reports, and compliance metrics. He looked calm. He always looked calm. This was routine for him. The tribunal chair was a Kalori named Adjudicator Voss, a heavy-set being with deep green skin and a voice like gravel, being slowly crushed. She opened the session with a flat summary. Case number 4471. Unregistered Finari minor, designation Lyra, no surname on record. Currently in unsanctioned temporary custody of human resident Danny Kowalski. Officer Pell has filed for transfer to the minor placement program. Mr. Kowalski has filed for provisional guardianship. We will hear both positions. Pell went first. He was efficient. He presented the case in clean, precise language. Danny's income was below the station's recommended threshold for a multi-dependent household. His apartment, despite a recent upgrade request, remained under the minimum square footage for interspecies housing. He had no formal xenobiological certification. The Finari minor had no legal ties to Mr. Kowalski. Standard procedure recommended institutional placement at the nearest labor rehabilitation facility for Finari minors without guardians. The system exists for a reason, Pell concluded. It ensures that minors are placed in environments equipped to meet their developmental needs. Mr. Kowalski's intentions may be admirable. His qualifications are not. Adjudicator Voss turned to Danny. Mr. Kowalski, you may present your case. Danny stood up. He had no data tablet. He had no advocate. He had a folder of paperwork he had filled out by hand at his kitchen table, some of it stained with coffee, all of it complete. He walked forward and placed a folder on the tribunal table. Everything is in there, he said. Dietary plan, approved by the free clinic on level 6. Financial records showing I've met the income threshold for the last 2 pay cycles. Housing upgrade application, pending. Background check, clean. Xenobiological assessment, completed. Voss flipped through the folder. The other 2 tribunal members, a Santhari and a human named Judge Dewey, did the same. These appear to be in order, Voss said. Officer Pell, your response? Pell did not hesitate. The income threshold was only met through overtime hours that are not sustainable long-term. The housing upgrade is pending, not approved. And the xenobiological assessment was performed at a free clinic with limited resources, not a certified interspecies care facility. I maintain that the standard placement protocol is the appropriate course of action. Danny felt the ground shifting under him. Pell was right about every technical detail. Every form Danny had filed, every requirement he had scratched and clawed to meet could be picked apart by someone who wanted to pick it apart he was going to lose. He could feel it. Then he did the only thing he had left. I'd like Lyra to speak, Danny said. The chamber went quiet. Voss looked at him over the edge of the folder. This is a legal proceeding, Mr. Kowalski, not a performance. Among the Finari, song is language, Danny said. He had learned this from the xenobiology files. He had read everything about Finari culture he could find. Their songs carry meaning that words don't. If you want to know if she's safe, if she's healthy, if she's cared for, let her speak in her own way. That's all I'm asking. Voss looked at Pell. Pell said nothing. She looked at the other 2 judges. Judge Dewey gave a small nod. Briefly, Voss said, Danny turned to Lyra. She was frozen on the bench, her small body pressed against Rosie's side. Her eyes were huge and wet and frightened. You don't have to, Danny said softly. But if you want to, you can. Lyra looked at him. Then she looked at the 3 judges behind their cold metal table. Then she looked at Pell, who had never once looked at her like she was a child. only ever like she was a case number. She stood up. Her legs were shaking. She walked to the center of the chamber. She was so small standing there, in that big metal room with its harsh lights and its hard surfaces. A tiny fox girl with patchy fur and ears too big for her head. She opened her mouth. No sound came out. Then Rosie did what Rosie always did. She got up from the bench, walked to the center of the chamber, and took Lyra's hand. She did not ask permission from the tribunal. She did not look at the judges or at Pell or at her father. She just took Lyra's hand and started humming. The same clumsy, off-key humming from the food court. The same wandering melody that had no shape but had all the meaning in the world. Lyra's throat markings flickered. Then they caught. Not blue, not amber, gold. Bright, steady, warm gold. The color flooded up her neck and along her jawline like sunrise, and Lyra sang. Not the calling song. Not the melody of a lost child searching for someone who would never come. She sang a Finari bonding hymn, a melody that their species reserved for one purpose and one purpose only, to sing to family, to the people you belong to the ones who were home. The sound filled the cold metal chamber and made it less cold. It bounced off the hard walls and softened them. It reached into every corner of that sterile, efficient room and planted something alive in it. Even Pell stopped typing in the back of the chamber. A Finari cultural consultant named Davy, who had been called as an observer, put her hand over her mouth. Her own throat markings, a deep violet, began to glow in response. Voss turned to her. Consultant Davy, can you explain what we are hearing? Davy's voice was barely steady. She is not calling for her family, Davy said. She is singing to them. She is telling them they are home. Among our people, this song is only sung when the bond is real. It cannot be faked. The bioluminescence confirms it. That color, that gold, it means she feels completely safe. Davy paused. Tears ran down her furred cheeks. She has already chosen her family. They're standing right next to her. The tribunal chamber stayed silent for 11 seconds after Lyra stopped singing. Danny counted them. 11 seconds in which the three judges sat behind their metal table and said nothing. An officer Pell stared at his tablet without typing, and a small fox girl stood in the middle of a cold room, glowing gold from throat to jaw, while a 5-year-old human held her hand. Adjudicator Voss spoke first. The tribunal will recess for deliberation. They were gone for 40 minutes. Danny sat on the bench with both girls on either side of him. Rosie leaned against his arm and fell asleep almost immediately because she was 5 and could sleep anywhere. Lyra sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her ears slowly rising from their flattened position. Her markings had dimmed from gold to a soft, steady amber. Not the color of searching, the color of waiting. Danny stared at the tribunal table and did not let himself hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what broke you when the answer was no. When the judges returned, Voss sat down and read from her screen without any ceremony. In the matter of case 4471, the tribunal grants provisional guardianship of the Finari minor, designation Lyra, to Danny Kowalski, human resident of Bridgeport Hub. This guardianship is subject to quarterly review for a period of 2 standard years, after which full guardianship may be petitioned. The minor will remain in the custody of Mr. Kowalski effective immediately. Danny did not move. Mr. Kowalski, Voss said, looking up. Did you hear me? He heard her. He just could not speak for a moment because his throat had closed and his eyes were burning, and he was a grown man in a tribunal chamber, and he was not going to cry in front of Officer Pell. Yes, he said. Thank you. Voss nodded. The tribunal notes that this case is unusual. Interspecies guardianship has limited precedent in this jurisdiction. We will be watching. She paused and looked at Lyra, who was looking back at her with those wide, dark Finari eyes. Take care of her, Mr. Kowalski. I will. Pell stood up, collected his tablet, and walked out without a word. He did not congratulate Danny. He did not acknowledge Lyra. He simply left because to him this was a case number that had been resolved, and there were more case numbers waiting. Danny would later learn that Pell processed over 200 minor placement cases a year. He would also learn that in the 6 years Pell had held the position, not a single placement had ever been challenged successfully by an individual without legal representation. Until now, outside the tribunal chamber, Danny knelt down in the corridor. It was an ugly corridor, gray metal and buzzing lights. But right now, it looked like the most beautiful place in the galaxy. He opened his arms, and both girls crashed into him. Rosie, fully awake now, said, "See? I told you." Lyra pressed her face into Danny's shoulder, and her throat markings glowed gold, bright and warm and steady. She said something in Finari that Danny did not understand. Then she pulled back, looked at him, and said in careful, slow human common, the word she had been practicing for weeks without telling anyone, "Danny. Home now." He could not stop the tears this time. He did not try. "Yeah, kid," he said. "Home now." 6 months later, things were different. The apartment on level 12 was gone. Danny had managed to secure a slightly larger place on level 10, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen where you could turn around without hitting the counter. It was not fancy. The walls were still metal. The lights still buzzed. But Rosie had put drawings on the walls, and Lyra had started growing small Finari plants on the windowsill, tiny bioluminescent flowers that glowed faintly at night, and together they had turned a metal box into something warm. Danny still worked cargo. His hands were still rough, and his back still ached, and his pay was still barely enough. But he had also started something new, a small advocacy group for interspecies foster families on the station. It turned out there were more cases like Lyra's than anyone wanted to admit. Alien children without parents, without homes, without anyone willing to fight the system on their behalf. Danny could not fight for all of them, but he could show other people how to fight. Rosie and Lyra shared a room by choice. Lyra had her own bed now, a real one, but most mornings Danny found them tangled together in one bed anyway. Rosie's arm over Lyra's side, Lyra's tail curled around Rosie's ankle that Lyra's fur had grown back thick and soft, the color of polished copper. Her markings glowed strong and steady. She was learning human common faster than Danny could keep up with, though she still spoke with a soft accent that made her words sound like they were wrapped in velvet. She called Danny by his name, never Dad or Father. He never asked her to. She would find her own word for what he was, in her own time. Her singing had changed too. The calling song was gone. She sang new melodies now, songs she made up herself, blending Finari tones with human tunes she picked up from Rosie. They were strange and beautiful. And on some evenings, other Finari on the station, orphans and refugees and strays, would find their way to Danny's apartment door. Drawn by the sound that on those evenings, Danny would open the door and let them in, and his small apartment would fill with the sound of Finari children singing together, their throat markings lighting up the dim room in blues and ambers and golds until the whole place looked like it was full of living stars. One evening, Danny walked through level 9 on his way home from a late shift. The food court was still busy, still loud, still the same as it had always been. He passed the spot where Lyra used to sit on her overturned crate. Gore, the Draenei trader, was walking the other direction. They made eye contact. Gore stopped. There was a long silence. "I do not understand your species," Gore said. Danny shrugged. "We don't always understand ourselves." Gore looked at him for another moment. Then he shook his large gray head and walked away. Danny kept walking. He took the lift to level 10. He opened his apartment door to the sound of singing and laughter and 2 girls arguing about whose turn it was to water the windowsill plants. Later that night, after Rosie was asleep, Danny sat on the apartment's small balcony overlooking the station's artificial sky dome. The dome projected a simulation of a night sky, fake stars against fake darkness. It was not much, but it was something. Lyra came out and sat beside him. She did not say anything. She just sat there, her legs dangling off the edge of the chair, and hummed a quiet melody. No words, just sound. Danny did not ask what the song meant. He had learned enough about Finari music to know that some songs were not meant to be translated. They were meant to be felt. Her markings glowed gold, steady, warm, the color that the Finari cultural consultant, Davy, had once told him meant absolute safety. Danny leaned back and closed his eyes and listened. Across the galaxy, humans were called many things. Deathworlders, reckless, stubborn, dangerous, unpredictable, a species from a planet so harsh it should have killed them 1,000 times over. All of that was true. But tonight, on a small balcony on a forgotten trade station at the edge of map space, a human was being something simpler than all of that. He was being a dad. And that, as it turned out, was the most human thing of all.